Hello guys, welcome to video number 5 in the Vortex setup series. In this step we will do Swash setup. So before you get started, make sure do not have any servos plugged into your Vortex just yet. Okay, we will get on with that shortly. Also, whatever you're going to use to power your Vortex right now, make sure that the input voltage does not exceed the rated voltage for your servos. So once you're certain of that, go ahead and power up your transmitter, power up the receiver and the Vortex. When the datapod screen becomes live and you get to the home screen, go ahead and navigate to Setup, scroll down to Swash, and press S. Your servo type, whether you have digital or analog, whichever servos you have, select that type here in the screen and press S. Swash type, 120 degrees is what it defaults to, probably because it's maybe the most popular nowadays. Whatever servo type, or swash type rather, that you have on your helicopter, go ahead and select that from your options and press S. Okay, right now in this section number 3 of Swash setup, trimming the servos, you can attach your servos at this time. You do not want to attach them in random order though. They need to go on specific ports on the Vortex. Now you'll notice on the Vortex flight computer label there's some writing, SV1, SV2, SV3. Refer to the Vortex setup guide. In the Swash section you'll see a diagram. It shows different servo layouts depending upon the swash type that you have. So take a look at your model, compare it to the diagram. One of those will match up, and from there it will tell you which of your servos is number 1, which is 2, and which is 3, etc. So once you've found that, you know which servos are 1, 2, and 3, go ahead and plug them into the corresponding ports of the Vortex, and then we'll be ready to proceed with trimming the servos. So very important in this section number 3, servo trim, we need to accomplish 3 things before we leave this step. Number 1 is 90-degree positioning of the servo arms. The second thing we need to accomplish is leveling of the swash plate all the way around. And the third thing is to set the main blades to 0 degrees of pitch. So we do not want to leave this trim step without accomplishing those 3 things. So first things first, the Vortex has driven your cyclic servos to their center resting positions. At this point you'll need to attach your servo horns and position them as close to 90 degrees as you possibly can without applying any trim through the data pod. If you need some assistance on what the 90-degree reference is, go in the Vortex user guide under main rotor linkage setup. There's a illustration there that will help you out with what the 90-degree reference is. So once you've attached your servo horns, you'll see I've attached mine and neither one of them is a perfect 90, so now we'll need to do some trimming. Servo number 1 on my helicopter is elevator servo in the back. You cannot see it, but right now I'm going to go ahead and trim it so I get a 90-degree angle. And if you're using a tool or if you're just doing it by eye, after you've trimmed your servo to what you're satisfied with is 90 degrees, go ahead and press S. Brings you to servo number 2 on my helicopter. That's this one here. You can see it's pretty far out, so I'm going to adjust that on the data pod using the plus and minus buttons. As you can see, the servo horn is moving. When I get to the point where I think it's as close to 90 degrees as I can possibly get it, I'm going to verify that by pressing S. Now this last servo, servo number 3 for me, is this one here. It's pretty darn close, but I can see that it's just a hair off, so I'm going to adjust it to what I think is 90 degrees. Alright, again, before we leave this servo trim step, you need to level your swash at this point. You need to use a tool maybe if you have one on hand, like this True Blood style, a zip tie if you like that method, or you can do the eyeball method. Whichever is your preferred method of leveling your swash, go ahead and do that now by physically adjusting these linkages, one for each servo. Once you've got your swash leveled, you need to attach a pitch gauge to either your blade, if you have your blades on, or your blade grip, and adjust these linkages here so you get 0 degrees of pitch on both blades. Once you're satisfied that you have 90 degrees, a level swash, and 0 degrees of pitch, then you can go ahead and press the S button. Alright everyone, as I said prior, you can keep your pitch gauge attached. I have mine removed just for purposes of this video so you can see exactly what's going on. So after you pressed S, we get to this swash servo matching screen. So at this point, we want to operate our collective stick, full positive, full negative, and what we want is to get the servos to match up with each other so they all move the swash in one direction, level up and down. And as you can see, that's not happening here. So this is collective stick operation. What I want to do is pick the next option in the data pod and R and see if that works for me. So now here's full positive stick, full negative. Okay, I get a up and down movement of the swash in a level manner. That's what you want in this step. So go through your available options and select the option that gives you a level swash moving up and down. Now before we leave this step, I just want to mention, if your swash plate is moving in an opposite direction right now than what you want, do not try to reverse that in your transmitter. In the next step, we will get on with reversing the direction of the swash plate. So what you want to accomplish here is just moving up and down in a level manner. Once you've got that, set your collective to the middle, go ahead and press S, and we get to pitch rate. Alright guys, I've attached my pitch gauge for this step. Before we get started, if you had your swash moving in the opposite direction on the previous step, this is what you want to do before we start adjusting the pitch rate. Is you'll notice that it defaulted to 100% on the positive side here. If you need to reverse the direction of your collective, all you do is bring that pointer to the negative side. Okay, now you'll adjust your pitch rate on the negative side. What you've done there is reverse the direction of your collective. If you're like me and collective was operating in the proper direction, we'll go back here and we will work on the positive side. So right now, move your collective stick to full positive, and this is where we will select your collective range. Whatever collective pitch range you want to work with, go ahead, use the plus and minus buttons on the data pod and set your maximum collective range. For me, I like to use 12.5 degrees. Whatever you like to use, go ahead and set it in the data pod with the collective stick at the top, so you get your maximum collective that you want to use. From here, you'll verify that by pressing S. Alright guys, again, just for purposes of the video, I have removed my pitch gauge. I'm going to put my collective stick back in the middle, and right now we need to verify our cyclic direction. So go ahead and operate your cyclic stick and watch the swash plate. When you give left aileron, the swash plate needs to move left. When you give right aileron, it needs to move right. Same thing with elevator. You want a forward tilt of the swash when you give forward cyclic. When you give back cyclic, you want a back tilt of the swash. Okay? You want the swash plate to move in the same direction as your cyclic stick, whichever direction that is. If you have a swash plate that's moving in a different direction, you need to go through the options in the data pod and pick the one that gives you the swash plate moving in the same direction as your cyclic stick. When you have that, go ahead and press S. Alright guys, as you can see, I have my pitch gauge back on there. We're in the cyclic 8 degrees step. This point is pretty simple. All you have to do is increase or decrease whichever direction you need to go in the data pod, so you get an 8-degree reading on your pitch gauge. Now, don't go real fast here on the data pod because it moves pretty quickly. Get precisely 8 degrees and stop. Okay. Now check the value that you have on the data pod. I have 106%. The Vortex setup guide mentions to keep it below 120%. Okay, so take a look at your value. If you're significantly higher than 120%, you might need to make an adjustment to the mechanics of your Swash servos. If you're significantly low, same thing, you might want to make an adjustment there. But if you're happy with the value that you have, go ahead and press S. Alright, let me remove my pitch gauge here so you can see what's going on. Now we are at the cyclic limit step of Swash setup. From here, the Vortex defaults to 12 degrees. So what you want to do is have your collective in the middle and give full cyclic. I'm going to start with aileron. And what you're doing is checking for binding. I don't have any binding in aileron. Elevator, you can hear some buzzing going on. Okay, so that indicates to me that I have some binding. I'm going to use the plus and minus buttons in the data pod and reduce the value to 11 degrees. I'm going to check for binding again. There's elevator, full elevator. I don't have any binding. The other way, I have some buzzing, but it's not binding. There's a lot of noise created by digital servos, so take that into account. I'm happy with the cyclic limit of 11 degrees, so I would press S at this point. If you want to take it one step further and adjust your cyclic to the maximum that your helicopter design allows, go ahead and do that right now. Operate your collective stick to full positive and full negative, and then give it cyclic in each direction, and make sure you don't have any binding anywhere. You don't want the swash to bind on your locking collar or on the frame. You don't want binding of the pitch control links with your swash, and you don't want binding anywhere in your linkages if you're using a bell crank setup. So go ahead and set your cyclic limits to what your preference is, so you don't get any binding, and press S. Okay, there we've completed Swash setup. From here, let's cycle down into Rotor Direction. Press S. You have two choices. This is going to be selected based upon what direction your rotor head turns while it's under power. Select the option that applies to you and press S. There, we've completed Swash and Rotor Direction. So, thank you for watching this video. I hope it helped you set up your Swash of the Vortex. And in the next video, we will cover setup of the tail.